About 3 weeks, we talked about the two spies. We talked about the things that Rahab heard and how her life was changed from a mess to a miracle. But I'm not going to cover the scarlet thread, even though usually people do preach on the scarlet thread. The reason I'm not going to is because it's taught and preached on so much. And a lot of it's more application or type. So it's a type of our salvation. It's a type of Jesus Christ's love and His blood. Maybe we'll do something on it later, but we're just going to go over that right now because I want to continue the thought of a miracle. Rahab from a mess to a miracle. Joshua chapter number 3 is another miracle. And we're going to read it here in Joshua chapter 3. And while I'm reading, I want you to try. I'm going to ask you a question. I'll ask you at the end of the lesson, but it's not a major deal if you can't answer it. But there's something fun to do, I guess. While I'm reading, try and find out where the Lord is. Try and find out where He's at while we're reading through here in Joshua chapter number 3. Just look for the Lord, and we'll talk about it later. Verse number 1. Joshua rose up early in the morning, and they removed from Shittim and came to Jordan, he and the children of Israel, and lodged there before they passed over. It came to pass after 3 days that the officers went through the host, and they commanded the people, saying, When ye see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, and the priests, the Levites, bearing it, then ye shall remove your place and go after it. Yet there shall be a space between you and it, about 2,000 cubits by measure. Come not near unto it, that ye may know the way by which ye must go, for ye have not passed this way heretofore. And Joshua said unto the people, Sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. Joshua spake unto the priests, saying, Take up the ark of the covenant, pass over before the people. And they took up the ark of the covenant, went before the people. And the Lord said unto Joshua, This day will I begin to magnify thee in the sight of Israel, that they may know that, as I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. And thou shalt command the priests that bear the ark of the covenant, saying, When ye are come to the brink of the water of Jordan, ye shall stand still in the Jordan. And Joshua said unto the children of Israel, Come hither, and hear the words of the Lord your God. Joshua said, Hereby ye shall know that the living God is among you, that He will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites. Alright? Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord, that wasn't in there, I added that. Behold, the ark of the Lord, of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth, passeth before you into Jordan. And therefore take ye 12 men out of the tribes of Israel, out of every tribe a man. It shall come to pass, as soon as the soles of the feet of the priests that bear the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of Jordan, that the waters of Jordan shall be cut off from the waters that come down from above. And they shall stand upon a heap. And it come to pass, when the people removed from their tents to pass over Jordan, and the priests bearing the ark of the covenant before the people. And as they that bear the ark were come unto Jordan, and the feet of the priests that bear the ark were dipped in the brim of the water, for Jordan overfloweth all his banks all the time of harvest, that the waters which came down from above stood and rose up upon a heap very far from the city of Adam, that is, beside Zaratan. And those that came down toward the sea of the plain, even the salt sea, failed, and were cut off, and the people passed over right against Jericho. And the priests that bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on the dry ground in the midst of Jordan, and all the Israelites passed over on dry ground until all the people were passed clean over Jordan. Brother Mark, do you care to pray for the lesson?
Our Father, we thank you, Lord, again for this opportunity to gather together in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ and around the Word of God.
Yes.
Sanctified and purified and preserved, Lord. We thank you, Lord, for this hour. We ask, Lord, to rest upon the preacher and the teacher, Lord. Give him power as only you can do, Lord. We pray you open our eyes and our ears to the Word of God this day and draw us near to thee. Thy glory, honor, and praise we ask in Jesus' name.
Amen. Like I said, we're going to continue that thought of a miracle. We talked about Rahab and from a mess to a miracle. And I hope you all don't mind if I teach on miracles for the next 3 or 4 Sundays. We're still an independent, fundamental, premillennial, dispensational, rightly dividing Baptist church. And we're one that believes in miracles. And we believe God works miracles. We believe He worked miracles thousands and thousands of years ago, millenniums ago, ages ago, and we believe He still works miracles today. Now, how He works is different at different times. I don't know if you've noticed this, but I bet you work a little bit different than what you did whenever you were 25. You still work, but you just work a little bit differently. Now, God's not worn out. You're not grown older or aged or anything. He is called the aged. But He works in different ways at different times, but He still works miracles. And we're going to give God credit for the miracles that He's done, and we're going to look at this miracle specifically. But you know, as a church, we've got to see miracles. We've got to see miracles. Brother Eugene coming in with that stimulator in his back, a couple Sundays ago. I know they took it back out, but Lord willing, they're going to put it back in. But he comes in the back door dancing. Well, that's a miracle. I mean, that's a miracle. We say, well, Aaron, no, that was a doctor, that was a physician. Well, where do you think they got the knowledge to do that?
Yeah.
I don't know, Brother Richard, I don't know if yours was a laser surgery or not on your eyes. Was it a laser that they used? But who would have thought that they could ever have a laser that would go into your eye and cut things out of it and you'd be fine to be able to see better? That's a miracle. A doctor did it, but God's worked miracles through the hands of men throughout all ages. Anytime you see a prophet do something, that's a miracle that God used a man to do or used a woman to do. You think of Sister Dottie and her heart, and she's up here this morning dancing while we're singing happy birthday to her. That's a miracle. I mean, that's a miracle that she's in church, and those are miracles that we've got to see. The fact that doctors can do it it's a miracle from God, but what's a greater miracle is what happens on the inside of man's heart. The greater miracle is what happened inside of the heart of Brother Mark's brother that we prayed for. A greater miracle is what was done in the life of Rahab, where her heart literally changed. You know you can do things to the outside of a man or woman's body, but you can't really do anything to the inside of their heart. That's their decision to make. You can bring your child to church all that you want to, but unless that child's heart is turned to God, they're not going to stay in church once they get the option to leave. You can physically bring them there. You can do things to the outside. You can make them dress the right way and talk the right way. But whenever they get to the point where they're able to make the decision from the inside, the heart, you can't change that. Only God can change that. Amen. And that's the real miracle. Turn over in your Bibles to Luke. We'll come back here to Joshua 3, so keep your finger there. But turn over to Luke chapter number 5. We're going to read a miracle in here. Luke chapter number 5. The greater miracle is what happens on the inside of man. Luke chapter number 5. While you're turning there, I'll read this verse to you. Here's another miracle that happens. Turn over to Luke 5, but this miracle is over in Psalms. I didn't write down the reference, but it says, I think it's Psalms 8:5. But what is man that thou art mindful of him, and the Son of Man that thou visitest him? You know what David said? He said, what is man that thou art mindful of him? He's saying, God, what is man that you think about him? You know that's a miracle. You know it's a miracle that our God thinks about us. You know, Grace and I were knocking on doors again over there with the Somalians yesterday, and I said, Grace, look at those women. They dress conservatively. They cover everything up. Their kids cover everything up, and their kids are out there playing stuff. It's a nice sunshiny day. I said, Grace, look at the way that they dress for their God. Their God means so much to them that every day that they wake up, they dress a specific way for their God. That's how much He means to them. And the sad thing is that He can't do anything for them. But our God thinks about us. What is man that thou art mindful of him? And look here in Luke chapter 5, the second, I guess you'd call it inward miracle or a spiritual miracle, is that God can forgive sins. Now that's a miracle. Look here in Luke chapter 5, verse 17. It came to pass on a certain day as he was teaching, that there were Pharisees and doctors of the law sitting by, which were come out of every town of Galilee, Judea, and Jerusalem, and the power of the Lord was present to heal them. And behold, men were brought in a bed, a man which was taken with a palsy, and they sought means to bring him in and to lay him before him. And when they could not find by what way they might bring him because of the multitude, they went upon the housetop, let him down through the tiling with his couch into the midst before Jesus. And when he saw their faith, he said unto him, Man, thy sins are forgiven thee. And the scribes and the Pharisees began to reason, saying, Who is this that speaketh blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God alone? But when Jesus perceived their thoughts, Jesus knows their thoughts, he answering said unto them, What reason ye in your hearts? Whether it is easier to say, Thy sins be forgiven thee, or to say, Rise up and walk. But that ye may know that the Son of Man hath power upon earth to forgive sins. He said unto the sick of the palsy, I say unto thee, Arise, and take up thy couch, and go into thine house. And immediately he rose up before them, and took up that whereon he lay, and departed to his own house, glorifying God. And they were all amazed, and they glorified God, and were filled with fear, saying, We have seen strange things today. Now you think about it, this man comes with palsy. That's where we get the term cerebral palsy. Palsy is it's a motor deficiency. It's like spasms or irregular motor movements where you can't control it, or it can be a spasm where your hands are drawn up, or maybe both hands, maybe all your legs. But the point is they grouped them all into palsy back then. Illnesses like that. And this man comes to Jesus, and you know the story. It's in Mark 2. But they come down. His friends would drop him through the roof there to get to Jesus. They were fanatics. Could you imagine if people were busting in to get to church? I mean, people were bringing their grandmothers into church in a chair and bringing them in trying to get into church. That's how much they wanted to get a hold of Jesus Christ. And they let their friend down, and Jesus sees their faith. He doesn't see the faith of the man that was hurting. He saw the faith of his brethren and how much they wanted to help their sick brother. And he comes up, and notice he doesn't say, walk up, arise, and walk. He says, thy sins be forgiven thee. And the Pharisees are ticked off about it. See, they're mad. They liked it whenever people came to them for counsel, or people came to them for advice, or whenever they got to sit behind those little black screens and say, my son, tell me all that's in thine heart. Bless thee, my son, thy Father in heaven, and I forgive thee of all thine sins. They like being the center stage and the ones that got to pray for people. Well, all of a sudden, this carpenter shows up, and people are coming to him, and he's not only saying you can get up and walk. He does that, by the way. He says, I'm going to forgive you. Now, to some people, that doesn't mean a lot to them. But I'll tell you this, if you've done wrong, forgiveness means a lot, don't it?
Yeah. Amen.
If you've done enough wrong in your life, forgiveness means a whole lot. And I can tell you this, I know a lot of people that could help someone relieve their back pain, relieve their arthritis, relieve their sore shoulder, their sore back, or give them medicine. I know a lot of people that can do that. I don't know a lot of people that can forgive. And Jesus Christ said, I'm not only going to forgive the one thing he's done wrong, I'm going to forgive a whole life of doing wrong. And I don't know, a lot of you live longer than I have. I only lived a few years here on earth, but I know this, it's hard to find a man or woman that totally forgives you for everything. It's hard for us to even do that. And the Pharisees are stunned by it, and Jesus Christ says, what's a greater miracle that I would say unto him, arise and walk, or that I forgive sins? Jesus Christ is saying the greater miracle isn't what happens physically. The greatest miracle is what happens on the inside, that I can forgive sins. And I don't know about you, but that's a miracle that God can forgive you and I. He could forgive us of our sins. And notice one more miracle. I could stay on longer there, but look verse 27. Here's another miracle. I just seen this morning while I was running the reference. After these things he went forth and saw a publican named Levi sitting at the receipt of custom, and he said unto him, follow me. And he left all, rose up, and followed him. And Levi made him a great feast in his own house, and there was great company of the publicans and of others that sat down with them. But their scribes and Pharisees murmured against his disciples, saying, why do ye yet eat and drink with publicans and sinners? Now I saw this morning, I thought, well, that's a good little thing. You know, not only is it a miracle that he forgives that man's sins, but then notice the second miracle happens. He goes to a publican, a tax collector, Levi. And Levi's at work. And God says to Levi, come with me, follow me. And Levi leaves his work behind. He forgets about everything. He leaves his home behind and becomes one of his disciples. Not only that, Levi has money, and you know that because he prepares a great feast. And he has other politicians come and eat with him. Levi's not a fisherman. He's not a carpenter. Levi's a rich man. Levi's a man with power. And Jesus Christ comes to Levi where he's working, where he's making a good living, where he's providing for his wife and children. Says, Levi, I've got something that I want you to do in the ministry. And folks, it's a miracle that Levi follows Jesus. Because there's not a lot of people in Levi's position today or throughout the last 2,000 years that would leave leave their work, leave their job, leave their comfort, the pleasures of home, and follow Jesus Christ. Levi's not going to have a house to sleep in for the next 3 years. He's probably going to die a martyr's death. But he chooses to follow Jesus, and I'll just throw this in there. He's eating with publicans, and then he's eating with sinners. By the way, the Jews hated publicans. They were politicians, and they intervened with the Jews, and they interfered with the Jews' things, and the Jews hated the publicans. And not only that, he's sitting with the carpenters, he's sitting with the fishermen, he's sitting with the harlots, eating with them. And that offended the Pharisees. See, the Pharisees like to tell you who you can and can't be friends with. The Pharisees say you can fellowship with these people, but you can't fellowship with these people. Jesus Christ said, I don't care who you think I should be friends with or who I should follow. I'm going to be with the publicans. I'm going to be with the sinners. I'm going to be with the ones that everyone else was rejected. And Jesus Christ was friends with who he thought he needed to be friends with. But that's a miracle that Levi went and followed the Lord. Now turn over to Joshua chapter number 3. Those are some inward miracles, but let's look at this miracle here, the Jordan. The miracle of Jordan. Joshua chapter number 3, God's going to do a miracle for the children of Israel and for Joshua. Now, just some background. Jordan means the descender. The descender. It descends about 1,000 feet from the Sea of Galilee to the Red Sea. I got a little map. I had these up here. I took them home. Now that I actually need them, I don't have them. I was going to pass them out today, but maybe next week. This is just a map. I know you can't see it very well, but right here is Jordan. A lot of you have this map probably in the back of your Bible, and the Jordan's right there, but the Jordan's going down. It's called the descender. And during flood season, which they're in verse 15, during flood season, the speed increases 10 miles an hour. So it's going, I don't know, 15, 20, 30 miles an hour. And it's normally 100 feet wide. If you get a chance to go home and look up the Jordan River so you can get a visual picture of it in your mind. But it's 100 feet wide, but during the flood in the spring, Mount Lebanon, the snow on the mountains melts, comes down to the river, and it becomes about a mile wide. So you have a mile-wide river that's going, I don't know, 20, 30 miles an hour. And they say it's very intimidating. They say it looks pretty violent and moves fast, but God's going to stop the river from flowing and then build it up in a heap. So He's going to let all that water, it's during flood season, we'll get into that later, but God's timing is something here. It's during flood season, He's going to stop that water and it's just going to build up in a heap. And it defies the laws of inertia, gravity, and expansion. It defies the laws of inertia, gravity, and expansion. The law of inertia says that an object in motion tends to stay in motion until a greater force acts upon it. If my fist is moving in this direction, let's say this, if my face is moving in this direction, it's going to keep moving in that direction until a greater force acts on it. The law of inertia says that if you didn't have any gravity, if you didn't have any force out in space or somewhere where you had zero force and you just threw something, it would keep going forever. It would never stop. Well, this miracle defies that because it's going to stop and there's no force to be seen. There is a greater force acting upon it, but we can't see it with our eyes. So it defies the law of inertia, it defies the law of gravity. You can't build water straight up in the air with nothing around it and it stay there. It's going to come down. What goes up must come down. Well, it did. It did stay there. And then it defies the law of expansion. The law of expansion. Water, unless it's inside of something, is just going to fall down. Unless it's frozen, it's just going to fall down. It has to be inside something. Well, this water just builds straight up, and there's nothing surrounding it that we can see, but it still stays there. That's the miracle that God did here in Jordan. And I did some math. There's around 2 million people. I was thinking of how long did the Lord let the water stay up like that? There's around 2 million people, men, women, children. And if they were in a straight line, which they probably weren't, they probably went lined up along the Jordan and all went across, I'd assume, to make it faster. I'm assuming they didn't go across in a straight line, but 2 million people, if they were lined up front to back, that line would be around 750 miles long. 2 million people. And then if you account for the fact that they would have carts, buggies, women, children, elderly, they'd be carrying, we're talking about a mile, or we're talking about 1,000-mile long line at least. That's if they're staying in a straight line. But the point I'm trying to make is that it took several hours for God to hold that water up. And that's the miracle that we're talking about. And I want you to notice something. God performs an inward miracle for an individual in chapter 2 with Rahab. An inward miracle for an individual in chapter 2. And we already talked about this, but her fear of God, her zeal for God, and her belief in God spreads to a couple other individuals and they get it. We already talked about the 2 spies. They go back and they say, man, look what the Lord hath done. They're excited about the work of God. They're excited about what God's done for them. And that happened with one individual, Rahab. And it spread to 2 men, the 2 spies. And then from there, their fear of God, their zeal for God, their belief in God is spread to the whole group of people. And God works a miracle for the whole people. You know your love for God is contagious. You'll affect others. You know this, you will affect people in some way. We think that no one's watching us. People are watching you. Someone's watching you. Several people are watching you. Maybe there's more watching some than others, but people are watching you, and you'll affect people one of 2 ways. There's only 1 or 2 ways you'll ever affect somebody. It's in 2 simple categories. You'll either bring people closer to God, or you'll bring them away from God. I've seen people literally sitting together inside of a church pew, and I've seen the conviction on one man's face and nothing on the wife's face. I've seen conviction on the wife's face and nothing on the man's face. And vice versa. I've seen it in teenagers, I've seen it in young people, I've seen it in homeless people, I've seen it in churchgoers. But you'll see one person where God's speaking to them, and the person beside them, God's nowhere within 1,000 miles of their heart and mind. And you always bring someone further away from God or closer to God. But notice the revival for God's people started with one person. It spread to 2 people, and then it went to the people as a whole. Revival starts with an individual. That's another example of a revival maybe hindering on one person. You. You know, if you get to praying long enough for the country and the state that it's in, and the churches, and the state that the church is in, not just our church, the churches, I'm talking church as a whole, across the whole world, you start praying long enough and you're being honest and you're pouring out yourself, you're confessing, you're purging and cleaning. By the way, a good 24-hour purge and cleanse of your body helps greatly with your health. But you know, a good 24-hour cleanse spiritually of praying in the morning, fasting in the morning. You say, Aaron, well, I can't fast. I got high blood pressure, I got diabetes, this and that. You can fast from what you want to fast from. Music, TV, sleep. You can fast from things. Pot, sugar, whatever it is. You can fast something. But a good 24-hour purging will do your spiritual health benefits. And the point is that when you start praying and you start fasting, you start seeking the face of God, what it usually comes back to, maybe it's not like this for you, but it is for me and it was people in the Bible, it usually comes back to saying, God, woe is me. Woe is my prayer life. Woe is my personal devotions. Woe is my witnessing. Woe is my testimony. Woe is my zeal and love for you and devotion to you and zeal for you to work in my life. Woe is me. You know, whenever a man gets closest to God, everyone else disappears. And it just becomes them and God. Revival starts with one individual and it spreads. And I'll say this, if one individual gets help at our tent meeting, it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's worth it. I preached a message at a church a couple of years ago, and I won't tell you the church's name, but their music wasn't my taste, their style wasn't my taste, their standards weren't my taste, and I got up and preached, and it was dry as a hammer. No one said amen, no one laughed, smiled, anything. You know, they all sit like this. Catch them out there at the ball field, though, on Sunday afternoon or Saturday afternoon, I'm sure they're, yeah! Woo! Yeah! That's my son! That's my grandson! They're probably taking pictures and all kinds of stuff. They come to church and all of a sudden, like a wooden Indian with a stick up their back. I want to go behind some of them and start doing this to them and just see if they start talking. But anyway, and that's how it was. I preached the whole sermon. It was just dead as a hammer, dry as a hammer. But I preached an encouraging message. I was nice. I preached on there in Luke chapter 5, actually, about their faith. He saw their faith. I was encouraging. And I didn't think anything was going to happen. I didn't think they believed in an altar call. I was like, no one's going to come down to an altar. And I can tell. I can just tell the church when no one comes down to the altar. It's a public confession of needing Jesus Christ and needing God's help and whatever it is. We're just going to give Him public testimony and praise and worship. I knew no one was going to come down. And one woman from the front pew comes down and is weeping and praying. And it was the pastor's wife. I didn't know this, but she was the one that needed the message. And I walked out of that encouraged because I said, God, if no one else listened to a thing I said, at least one woman got help from it. Amen. And if one person gets help from our tent meeting, it was a success.
Yeah.
One individual. God blesses a church that goes after individuals that no one else goes for. Individuals at a nursing home, individuals in an apartment complex that they may not be great tithers. And I'll just throw this in there. This is on the testimony of Brother Ron Ralph and Danny Farley, who know quite a bit about finances. But they say this, I'm just going to listen to them. They said, haven't you learned that the people with the most money usually don't tithe? People always say, well, we go to that apartment complex, they're not going to be able to tithe, they're not going to be able to give. Well, usually, there's exceptions, but usually the people with the money, the reason they have the money is that they don't give it away. But the point is God blesses a church that goes after individuals that no one else wants to go for. A church that goes after children, not for the sake of getting their parents in, but just to get the children in church. You know, we went over there to that apartment complex on Thursday down over here, and you seen children, man, walking around, and they got dirt all over their face, this and that. And I thought, God, if we could just save those children from the fire and change their life around, regardless if their parents ever come. We may have to put out more money to go get the children. We may have to put out more time to go and pick them up. We may have to do more on our part, and the children can't give anything back to us, but if we could just save those children. I'm talking about God blesses a church that goes after individuals. He blesses them as a whole. And I was originally going to do the requirements for a miracle. That's originally what I was going to teach on. But I'm going to do that next week. I just want to give you 3 things quickly on the purpose of the miracle. The purpose of a miracle. I'm going to give it to you quickly, but the purpose of a miracle, why does God perform miracles? Why did he perform this one specifically? And I will just give you these three and we'll be done. Number one, it's to show the children of Israel that he is going to lead them because they've never been here before. Number one, to show the children of Israel that he is going to lead them. He's going to lead them because they've never been here before. I'll give you the second one here. We'll talk about it. To show the children of Israel that he's going to bring them the victory. That's number two. He does a miracle to show them that he's going to bring them the victory. And number three, to show them that he is with them. To show the children of Israel that he is with them. Number one, he wants to show them that he's going to lead them because they've never been here before. Verse number 4. Joshua 3:4. There shall be a space between you, about 2,000 cubits by measure. Come not near unto it, that ye may know the way by which ye must go, for ye have not passed this way heretofore. God's going to bring them victories over enemies that they've never faced before. God says, I'm going to do this miracle in your sight because you're going to face some things right now and in the upcoming years, your enemies that you've never faced them before. I have them, you'll see this later on when I get it to you, but this has all the enemies. It has the 12 tribes and where they were at, and then it has all the enemies, the Edomites, the Amalekites, the Kenites, the Philistines, the Hittites, Jebusites, Perizzites, Hivites, Canaanites, Zidonians, Girgashites, Hittites, Hivites, Amorites, Ammonites, and Moabites. It has them all listed where they were at. They're going to face some enemies that they've never faced before. Now, can I ask you a question? Have you ever been in a situation and you don't have all the answers and you realize you're in over your head? You don't know what to do. God stumps you. You say, I've never been this way before. You've never been through this before. You know what God says? I'll lead you through it. God says,